The sun was high over the desert town of Jericho Ridge. A dry wind swept across the narrow roads, making dust dance in the air like restless spirits. This town, surrounded by miles of nothing but sand and rocks, looked like a forgotten place. To strangers. But to the people who lived there, it was home. Quiet, slow-moving, and tough, just like the folks who stayed behind when others left for bigger cities. Marissa Dalton had never wanted to leave. She had lived here all her life. At 38, she had deep lines on her hands from turning wrenches, and long days in the sun. Her father had been a mechanic, and she grew up watching him fix trucks, tractors, and whatever old junk people dragged in. When he passed away 5 years ago, Marissa took over his auto shop, keeping the name just like he left it, Dalton's Auto Repair. Her shop wasn't fancy. The sign was chipped. The garage door squeaked when it opened. But she was good at what she did. Really good. If a car came in coughing and wheezing, she could figure out the problem in minutes. Most people in Jericho Ridge trusted her more than the bank, more than the sheriff. She charged fair prices, never took shortcuts, and didn't take crap from anyone. She worked hard, kept her head down, and raised her 12-year-old son, Jake, with the same straight-backed pride her father had taught her. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the heat shimmered above the blacktop like water. Marissa had just finished patching a leaky radiator on a dusty Ford pickup when she heard the crunch of tires outside the garage. She wiped her hands on a rag and stepped into the sunlight. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled up and parked crookedly across 2 spaces. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out. He was dressed in full military uniform, his chest heavy with medals, and his posture stiff with discipline. His head was clean-shaven, and his eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses. He moved like someone who expected the world to step out of his way. "Afternoon," he said, his voice low and clipped. "I'm Colonel Raymond Knox." Marissa nodded slowly. "Afternoon, Colonel. I need your help with a car," he said, glancing back at the SUV. "Not this one. I have a '67 Mustang, black V8. Beautiful piece of machinery. She's been acting up, needs someone who knows what they're doing." "I'm booked through the week," Marissa replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "Can't promise anything. Until next Tuesday." The colonel's jaw twitched. "This isn't a request for next Tuesday. It's a request for right now." Marissa raised an eyebrow. She had seen men like him before, sharp, clean, powerful. They talked like their time was more valuable than yours, but the thing about Marissa was she didn't care much for rank. She didn't care if you were a colonel or the president. If you didn't make an appointment or show basic respect, you waited like everyone else. "I'm sorry, Colonel," she said. "I've got 2 cars ahead of yours, and one of them belongs to a school teacher who's been waiting 3 days for her brakes to stop squealing. I can put your name down, but that's all I can do today." Colonel Knox took off his sunglasses. His eyes were sharp, cold, the color of old steel. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just slightly. "I think you misunderstand, Miss Dalton. I'm not just anyone off the street. I'm a high-ranking officer at the Jericho military base. I'd hate for things to get complicated." Marissa crossed her arms. "Oh, I understand you just fine. But this isn't the base. This is my shop, and everyone waits their turn." A long silence followed. The colonel studied her face as if trying to figure out whether she was bluffing. Marissa didn't blink. "Fine," he said finally. "You've made your point." He turned on his heel and got back into the SUV. The engine roared, and the vehicle sped off, tires throwing up clouds of dust. Marissa watched him go, then turned back to her work. Her heart was beating a little faster than normal, but her face stayed calm. Jake came out from the office a few minutes later, holding a can of soda. "Who was that guy?" he asked. "Just another customer," she said, patting his shoulder. "Let's get back to work." But that night, after she closed the shop and made dinner, Marissa kept thinking about the way the colonel had looked at her. Not angry, exactly. More like surprised. Like he couldn't believe someone had told him no. The town of Jericho Ridge didn't get many outsiders. The base was still active, though smaller than it used to be, and most of the soldiers stayed on their side of the fence. When they did come into town, they usually kept to themselves, grabbed a burger, fueled up, and drove back before sunset. But this colonel, he was different. There was something about the way he carried himself, like he thought the whole town owed him something. Marissa pushed the thought out of her mind and focused on Jake. She helped him with his homework, then watched an old movie with him before tucking him into bed. The desert was quiet that night, as always, with only the sound of crickets and the distant hum of power lines. She slept light, like she always did, her dreams filled with gears and engines and strange shadows. The next morning started like any other. Marissa made coffee, packed Jake's lunch, and dropped him off at school. Then she drove to the shop, humming to the radio and thinking about the engine overhaul waiting for her. But as she turned the corner onto Main Street, she saw them. 3 Army vehicles, parked right outside her garage. 2 Humvees and 1 plain-looking military truck. Uniformed men stood around talking quietly, some of them glancing at her as she pulled into the parking lot. A tall man in a different uniform, one she didn't recognize, approached her as she got out of her truck. "Miss Dalton?" he asked politely. "That's me," she said slowly. He handed her a folded piece of paper. "You're being placed under inspection by order of the Regional Defense Office. Something about potential security threats connected to civilian businesses near the base." Marissa blinked. "Excuse me?" "It's standard procedure, ma'am. Should only take a day or 2. The men were already walking toward her garage, clipboards in hand. They weren't rough. They didn't break anything. But they looked everywhere, under the lift, in her toolboxes, even in her office drawers. Marissa stood by the door, arms crossed, her stomach twisting. It didn't feel like a standard procedure. It felt like a message. By the time they left that afternoon, the whole town had heard about it. Jericho Ridge was small, and news traveled faster than the wind. People came by the shop asking questions. Some offered support. Others looked nervous. Marissa kept her answers short and calm, even though inside she was angry. Later that evening, she sat alone at her kitchen table staring at the inspection paper. Her fingers drummed against the wood. This wasn't random. This wasn't normal. She thought about the colonel's car, the way he had insisted, the way he had looked at her when she refused, and she knew, deep in her gut, that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Of course. Here's part 2 of the story, written in simple and interesting English, and expanded to about 2,500 words as requested. The morning after the Army inspection, Marissa woke up feeling a strange heaviness in her chest. It wasn't fear, exactly. She wasn't someone who scared easily. But it was something close. Her stomach felt tight. Her thoughts were cloudy. Even the air around her seemed heavier. The desert sun rose like it always did, turning the sky gold and orange, but nothing about this morning felt normal. She made breakfast for Jake in silence. He sat at the table, munching on toast, watching her with quiet eyes. He was only 12, but he was smart enough to know something was wrong. Kids could always feel it when adults were pretending everything was fine. "Are those Army guys coming back today?" he asked, pushing his eggs around his plate. Marissa poured him a glass of orange juice. "I don't know," she said. "But if they do, I'll handle it." "Why are they even bothering you?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Because I told someone something they didn't like." Jake frowned. "That's not fair." "No," she said, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "It's not." After she dropped him off at school, Marissa drove to the shop with a strange sense of alertness. Her eyes moved faster than usual, checking mirrors, scanning the road, watching the sidewalks. Every noise felt louder, every shadow heavier. When she arrived, she found the garage door left slightly open. That was strange. She always locked up tight. Her heart jumped. She parked and walked up slowly. Nothing seemed broken, but when she stepped inside, she saw it. Her desk drawer was open. The papers were shifted around. Someone had been there. She checked the cash box, untouched. Tools were in place. But someone had been snooping, and they hadn't even tried to hide it. Her phone rang. It was Cassie, the town's post office clerk and her friend since high school. Cassie whispered, as if someone might be listening through the wires. "Hey, did you hear what happened last night?" Marissa stiffened. "What?" The lights at the base flickered off around midnight, then came back on 10 minutes later. "My cousin's husband works there. Said it was some kind of unauthorized power cut. They're saying it was sabotage, but it might just be an excuse. And he said your name came up in the mess hall this morning." "My name?" Marissa asked, her voice quiet. Marissa thanked her and hung up. Her fingers trembled slightly as she placed the phone down. This was no longer about a car. Something bigger was happening. Something the colonel didn't want anyone to see. And now she had become a problem. She wasn't the kind of woman to sit and do nothing. She needed answers. She locked up the shop and drove over to the library where her old friend Sean worked. Sean used to be a journalist in Phoenix before he moved back to Jericho Ridge to take care of his mom. He still had a nose for trouble, and a few useful connections. "Sean," she said as she walked into the dusty reading room, "I need your help. Off the record." He raised an eyebrow. "This about the colonel's car?" "Yes. And everything. That's happened since I told him no." Sean poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. "Talk." She told him everything. The colonel's visit, the strange inspection, the open drawer, and the phone call from Cassie. Sean listened carefully, nodding now and then. When she was done, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. "I've heard rumors," he said. "Not about you, but about the base. There's been weird activity over there for months. Trucks coming in late at night. Storage units being built and torn down with no paperwork. People transferred in and out without explanation. I thought it was just black ops nonsense." Marissa shook her head. "I think it's something dirty. Illegal even. That Mustang the colonel wanted me to fix. It had custom panels under the chassis. I saw them when he showed me pictures. That's not normal. You don't hide panels under a classic car unless you're trying to move something." Sean frowned. "Like weapons? Drugs? Parts?" She nodded. "Could be anything. But whatever it is, he didn't want to risk it being delayed. And when I said no, they sent in the army to scare me." Sean leaned in. "Let me make a few calls." For the next hour, Marissa sat in the back of the library, flipping through car magazines to calm her nerves. Finally, Sean came back, his face tight with concern. "You were right," he said. "There's talk about an unauthorized network of private shipments coming out of the Jericho base. Some kind of black market deal. Old parts, stolen tech, maybe worse. No proof yet, but one of my old contacts in the military said your colonel, Knox, was transferred from another base after a scandal. They buried it quietly." Marissa felt a rush of cold run down her arms. "I think he's using that Mustang to transport whatever it is," she said. "He wanted me to fix it fast, maybe to keep it from falling apart. And when I refused, he panicked," Sean finished. "He figured if you looked too closely you'd see something you weren't supposed to." That evening Marissa sat alone in her shop, the lights dim, her arms folded tightly. She was angry. Not just for herself, but for Jake. For her father, who had built this place with his hands. For the people in the town who trusted her. If the colonel thought he could scare her into silence, he didn't know her at all. But the truth was, she also knew she couldn't fight him alone, so she went home and sat at her kitchen table again, just like before. This time, she opened her laptop and began typing a report. A detailed account of everything that had happened since Colonel Knox had walked into her garage. She included descriptions of the car, her refusal, the inspection, the name of the officer who handed her the order, and what Sean had found. She titled it, Suspicious Military Pressure on Civilian Business, Possible Evidence of Corruption. Then she sent it. Not just to the mayor. Not just to the local sheriff. She sent it to the Pentagon. She didn't expect a reply, not right away. But she knew the moment she hit send, she had crossed a line. Later that night, after Jake had gone to sleep, she sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars blink in the sky. The desert was quiet again. Still. But now, even the silence felt like it was holding its breath. She thought about her dad, how he used to sit in that same spot, watching the night with calm eyes and quiet strength. He would have told her she did the right thing. And somehow that thought gave her courage. But the next morning would bring new problems. The school called first thing. Jake had been questioned by two men in suits who claimed to be security consultants. They asked him strange questions about Marissa's shop, who visited, what she talked about at home. The principal stopped them and reported the incident. But by then, they had already left, Marissa's hands clenched into fists. They were trying to get to her through her son. She called the sheriff. He didn't pick up. She called the mayor. He said his hands were tied and that military matters were above his pay grade. By noon, she had 5 customers cancel their appointments. One local vendor said he wouldn't make deliveries to her shop anymore, and 2 men in a black sedan parked across the street for hours, doing nothing, just sitting there, watching. Marissa didn't back down. She kept working, changed oil, rotated tires, fixed a cracked windshield. Every customer who did show up got a smile and top service, but inside, she knew this was just the beginning. At sunset, just as she was closing the garage door, Sean showed up again. He looked excited. "I got an email," he said, holding up his phone. "From someone inside the Defense Department. They want to talk to you. Off the record. They've been watching the same things. But they needed a civilian witness. Someone who could confirm what's happening outside the base." Marissa's heart pounded. "They believe me?" Sean nodded. "And they want to meet. But you'll have to be careful. Very careful." She looked back at the shop, her father's tools hanging neatly on the wall. The smell of oil and metal in the air. The fading sunset glowing across the cracked floor. She had spent most of her life here, and now it had become the center of something far bigger than she ever imagined. "I'll do it," she said. "But I'm not doing this to be a hero." Sean smiled. "I know. I'm doing it," she continued, "because people like Colonel Knox think they can walk into small towns like this, push people around, and get away with it. And someone's got to remind them. Not everyone bows to a uniform." The sky darkened. The wind picked up a little, carrying the scent of distant rain. Rare in Jericho Ridge, but not impossible. Marissa stood in the doorway of her shop, watching the 2 men in the black sedan still parked across the street. She didn't wave. She didn't flinch. She just stared back, and in that moment, she knew this fight wasn't over. It had just begun. The night felt colder than usual in Jericho Ridge. It wasn't just the temperature, it was the tension. The quiet had a sharp edge to it, like the whole town was holding its breath. Marissa sat by the window in her small living room. The lights turned low. The curtain was slightly open, just enough for her to see the black sedan parked across the street. The same one that had been there all day. The same one where 2 men sat, taking turns watching her shop, her house, her life. She didn't know if they were military, private security, or something else entirely. But she knew they weren't just bored. They were there for a reason. They were waiting. Watching. Jake was asleep upstairs, his room quiet except for the hum of a small fan. Marissa had checked on him twice already. She couldn't stop worrying. They had gone after him at school. They might do it again. She knew it. She turned her eyes back to the street. The men in the car were still there. One was on the phone. The other drank coffee. Never looking away from her house, Sean had set up the meeting. It would happen tomorrow evening, a few miles out of town at an old water tower that hadn't been used in years. The man who wanted to talk to her, someone from the Defense Department, had chosen the spot carefully. Remote, quiet, away from the eyes of anyone who might report back to the colonel. Marissa didn't sleep much that night. She kept her boots near the door, her phone charged, and her keys in her pocket, just in case she had to run or fight. By morning, the sedan was gone. But that didn't make her feel safer. It only meant they had changed tactics. Jake got ready for school slowly, watching her with cautious eyes. "Are we okay?" he asked softly. Marissa nodded, even though she wasn't sure. "We're okay, I promise." She packed his lunch with extra care, kissed his forehead, and made sure the bus picked him up. Then she walked to her truck, opened the driver's door, and paused. There was a folded paper on the windshield. It wasn't a note. It was a photo of her, taken from a distance, standing in her shop, talking to Sean. On the back, in thick, black ink, were 3 words: "Stop digging. Now." She didn't flinch. She didn't look around. She simply folded the photo again, slid it into her pocket, and drove to work. At the garage, everything felt normal. The oil-stained floor, the rattle of tools, the whine of a drill. But Marissa knew the truth. Normal was gone. This was war now, quiet, shadowy, and dangerous. Around noon, Cassie showed up with a bag of sandwiches and 2 cans of soda. She didn't say much at first, just handed over the food and sat down on the tailgate of a pickup in the bay. "You know," she said, "I always thought this town was boring. Nothing ever happened. Just heat and dust and the same old faces." Marissa gave a tired smile. "And now?" Cassie took a sip of soda. "Now I kind of miss boring." They sat in silence for a few minutes, eating, thinking. "Sean told me about the meeting tonight," Cassie said at last. "You sure you want to go?" Marissa nodded. "I have to. Someone has to." "You should be careful." "I know." As the day passed, Marissa worked on 2 cars, made a few calls, and kept an eye on the street. The black sedan didn't come back, but she noticed a white SUV she hadn't seen before, parked near the diner down the block. A man inside pretending to read a newspaper but glancing her way every few minutes. She wasn't afraid, but she was getting tired. Tired of looking over her shoulder. Tired of pretending she wasn't angry. By 5 o'clock, she locked the shop early. She told no one where she was going. She packed a flashlight, a small notebook, and a digital recorder just in case. Sean had given her a burner phone with only 1 number programmed into it. The contact from the Defense Department. She drove out of town in her old Ford pickup, staying below the speed limit, keeping off the main roads. The sky turned orange behind her, casting long shadows across the desert. By the time she reached the water tower, it was nearly dark. The tower was rusty, surrounded by cracked pavement and dry weeds. It had been out of use for at least a decade. There were no houses nearby, no streetlights, just the open sky and the hum of the wind. A black SUV was parked near the base of the tower. A man stood beside it, dressed in plain clothes, dark jeans, a gray jacket, no visible weapon. He looked serious but not threatening. When Marissa stepped out of her truck, he raised a hand in greeting. "You're Marissa Dalton?" he asked. "Yes. My name's Agent Keller. I work for Internal Defense Oversight. I read your report." That was brave. Marissa looked him in the eye. "I didn't send it to be brave. I sent it because it was the truth." Keller nodded. "That's why I'm here." They talked for nearly an hour. Marissa told him everything again, with more detail this time. About the colonel, the car, the inspection, the threats. She handed over the photo she'd found on her windshield. She played the voice recording Sean had helped her make earlier. That week, capturing her own summary of the events. Keller listened carefully, asked a few sharp questions, then scribbled notes in a small black book. "I've been tracking Colonel Knox for months," he said. "He's been using different bases for illegal shipments, hiding things in private vehicles, smuggling them off government property. We've had a hard time proving it. But what you saw, that Mustang, that's key. It could connect him to everything." Marissa frowned. "So what happens now?" Keller hesitated. "I'll need to take this information up the chain. Carefully. We can't spook him yet. If he thinks he's being watched, he'll burn everything. But this changes things. You've given us what we needed." "And what about me?" she asked. "And my son?" Keller looked at her seriously. "We'll do everything we can to keep you safe. But you should be ready. If he finds out you've been talking to us, things could get dangerous. More than they already are." "I'm already in it," she said. "I'm not backing down." "Then be smart, stay alert, watch your back." They shook hands. He gave her a secure number to call in case of emergency, then disappeared into the night, leaving her with her thoughts and the sound of the desert wind. As she drove back to town, Marissa felt a strange mix of relief and fear. She had finally found someone who believed her, someone who might be able to stop Knox. But now, she was deeper than ever. And the enemy wasn't going to wait quietly. She got home around 9. The house was dark. She stepped inside, calling softly for Jake. No answer. Her heart jumped. She moved quickly, checking each room. His backpack was there, his shoes, his water bottle on the table. But no Jake. Then she saw it, a note on the kitchen counter, written in sharp black ink. "You were warned. Now you'll listen." She grabbed her phone and called Sean. No answer. She called the emergency number Keller had given her. A man picked up immediately. "They took my son," she said. "Jake, he's gone." The voice on the other end didn't waste a second. "We're on it. Lock your doors. Stay inside. We'll find him." But Marissa didn't sit still. She couldn't. Her blood was roaring in her ears. Her hands were shaking, but her legs moved fast. She grabbed her father's old tool bag, stuffed with heavy wrenches, gloves, and a flashlight, and headed out again. She checked the streets, the alleys, the school. She drove to the edge of town, then past the diner. The white SUV from earlier was gone. Then she saw it. The black Mustang, parked behind an old barn on the outskirts of town. She pulled over slowly, headlights off, heart pounding. The barn had once belonged to an old rancher, long dead. It had been abandoned for years. She crept closer. Inside, the barn was dim, lit only by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The Mustang sat there sleek and clean, like it had just been washed. And beside it, Jake, tied to a chair, gagged, eyes wide with fear. Marissa didn't think. She didn't stop. She burst in, swinging a heavy wrench in her hand. One of the men guarding Jake barely had time to turn before the wrench slammed into his shoulder. He fell, yelling in pain. The second man reached for something, but she kicked the chair into him, knocking him down. She ran to Jake, pulled off the gag, cut the ropes with a knife she kept in her pocket. His arms flew around her, crying, shaking. "I'm okay, Mom," he whispered. "I'm okay." But footsteps echoed outside. More were coming. She grabbed his hand. "Run, now!" They bolted through the back of the barn just as another car pulled up outside. She didn't look back, just ran, lights behind them, shouts. But ahead, headlights coming their way. Keller. His SUV skidded to a stop, doors flying open. Agents swarmed. Out, guns raised, shouting commands. In moments it was over. Jake was safe. Knox's men were in handcuffs. And the Mustang? Seized. Marissa stood there, heart pounding, dust in her lungs, clutching Jake close. Keller approached her. "You were right about everything," he said. "We'll be taking the colonel in tonight." Marissa didn't smile. She didn't feel victorious. She felt tired, but also strong. She looked at Jake, then at the agents around her, and she knew this was not the end, but it was a turning point, and she had made it through. The next morning the sun rose quietly over Jericho Ridge, but nothing about the day felt normal. Marissa stood at her kitchen window holding a mug of black coffee in her hands, staring outside but not really seeing anything. Her mind was still, stuck in last night's chaos. Jake tied up, the barn, the Mustang, the agents, and Keller's promise that it was finally over. But it didn't feel over. Jake was upstairs, sleeping soundly after the long night. She had checked on him twice, already. His breathing was calm. His face was peaceful. But even when he slept, he kept holding a flashlight in one hand like some part of him didn't fully believe the danger was gone. Marissa understood that feeling. She felt it too. Her phone buzzed. It was Keller. "We got Knox," he said, without even saying hello. She blinked. "What?" "Colonel Knox. He was arrested at his private property early this morning. We had a team watching him all night. After what happened at the barn, we had enough to move. He's in federal custody now." Marissa let out a slow breath. "That's good." "It's more than good," Keller said. He was in the middle of moving 3 more cars filled with illegal weapons and tech. High-grade stuff, way above anything you'd find on the market. "We've been trying to get him for 2 years. But you cracked it open in less than a week." Marissa didn't say anything. She still couldn't believe it. That one choice, refusing to fix a suspicious car, had led to all this. Keller continued, "We'll need you to give an official statement. Testify later, maybe. But for now, just rest. We'll assign a security team to stay near your home. For a few days." "No," Marissa said quickly. "No. No uniforms. No guards outside my door. I don't want people asking questions. This is a small town, Keller. If they see guys in black suits standing around my garage, they'll panic." There was a pause. Then Keller agreed. "All right. We'll keep our distance. But we'll be close. You have my number. Use it." After the call ended, Marissa sat at the kitchen table. She looked at the notepad where she'd written down names, times, license plates, phone numbers, all pieces of the puzzle. It had felt like chasing shadows. But now the shadows were caught. Still, a strange emptiness grew. In her chest, what now? By afternoon, Jake had woken up. He came downstairs slowly, rubbing his eyes. Marissa smiled at him and made pancakes, even though it wasn't morning anymore. "Did they get the bad guy?" Jake asked between bites. "Yeah," she said. "They got him." He nodded like he expected that answer. "So, we're safe now?" She wished she could say yes, but she just said, "We're safer." After they ate, they drove to the garage. Marissa hadn't planned on opening up, but something about being in her shop made her feel normal again. The smell of oil and metal, the way tools hung neatly in their places. It grounded her. Cassie was already there, sweeping the floor even though it didn't need it. "I heard," she said quietly. "Sean told me this morning. He said the colonel's arrest is already on a few underground sites. People are talking." Marissa raised an eyebrow. "Underground sites?" Cassie smiled a little. "You'd be surprised how many people keep tabs on shady military projects. There's a whole world out there that's into this stuff." "Good. Let them talk." She walked back to her office, grabbed a clipboard, and started reviewing a few customer requests that had been delayed during the chaos. One of them caught her attention, a name she didn't recognize. An appointment request for minor engine inspection, scheduled for the next day. Marissa frowned. The name, Trent Elwood, meant nothing to her, but something about the request felt off. "Cassie," she said, "do you remember booking this one?" Cassie walked over and looked at the clipboard. "Nope, I don't remember this guy at all. Find out who he is, Search the name, I want to be sure. Cassie pulled out her phone, already typing. Got it, she said after a minute. There's no one named Trent Elwood in the state registry. No license, no social, no address. It's fake. Marissa's heart sank. Cancel it. Block the number. Cassie nodded, so it wasn't over after all. Not completely. Later that night, Marissa sat with Jake watching a movie, but her mind wasn't on the screen. She kept thinking about that fake appointment. Was it a test? A warning? Or maybe someone Knox had worked with? Someone who hadn't been caught yet? The colonel had money, connections, secrets. He hadn't worked alone. At midnight, when Jake had finally fallen asleep again, Marissa stepped out onto the porch. The stars above looked cold and distant. A breeze brushed her face, soft but sharp. Then a voice came from the shadows. You're tougher than you look. She turned fast, reaching for the small knife she kept in her pocket. But it was Sean. He stepped into the moonlight, hands raised. Sorry, he said. Didn't mean to scare you. Marissa sighed and relaxed. You're lucky I didn't throw something at you. I wouldn't blame you. He leaned on the porch railing. His face was tired, like hers. I came to warn you, he said. There's chatter. Chatter? People Knox worked with. Some of them were at higher levels. Contractors, engineers. One of them escaped a raid this morning. We think he knows about you. Marissa's stomach tightened. Do they know where I live? Not yet, but it won't be hard to find out. Then what do I do? Sean looked at her seriously. Disappear, just for a while. Take Jake, go off the grid. Let the government finish what they started. Let Keller clean it up. Marissa shook her head. No, I won't run. You're not running. You're protecting your kid. Look, I've seen these people. If Knox was this dangerous, imagine the ones who are still out there. People who never leave a trace. Marissa was quiet. Then she asked, Where would I go? Sean smiled faintly. I know a place. My uncle has a cabin up north near the old mining hills. No signal. No roads. No one will find you there. And you think that's safe? Safer than here. That night Marissa packed a bag for her and Jake. Just the basics. Clothes, food, tools, and a photo of her father that she kept in her desk drawer. By dawn, they were on the road. They drove north, far past the town lines, through winding roads and thick trees, until the world around them changed. No buildings, no lights, just forest, wind, and sky. The cabin was small but sturdy, made of wood and stone. It had no power, but it had a fireplace, a well, and a view of the hills that made it feel like another planet. Jake looked around, unsure. Are we staying here? For a little while, Marissa said. It's like an adventure. Are the bad guys coming here? No, she promised. Not here. In the days that followed, Marissa found peace in small things. The way the fire crackled at night. The sound of birds in the morning. The way Jake laughed when he tried to catch frogs near the stream. But even in the calm, she stayed alert. She checked the edges of the forest every morning. She kept her radio on, scanning channels. She cleaned her knife every night before sleep. And then, on the 5th day, something happened. She found footprints. Not theirs. New, large, heavy boots heading toward the cabin from the east. She didn't panic. She didn't scream. She simply moved fast. She woke Jake, told him they were going to play a hiding game. She led him to a small shelter they had built 2 days ago in case of storms. It was hidden under thick branches and covered with leaves. Stay here, she whispered, no matter what. He nodded, his eyes wide but brave. Then she went back to wait. Whoever was coming, she'd meet them first. The first man appeared just before sunset. He stepped into the clearing near the cabin, rifle slung over one shoulder, dressed in a uniform without markings. She didn't recognize him, but he saw her and smiled. You're the mechanic, right? He said. Marissa didn't answer. "I've heard about you. Took down a colonel. Got guts." Still no answer. He kept walking closer. "Thing is," he said, "you messed with something bigger than you can imagine. Knox was just the surface. And now people want answers. People like me." Marissa raised the tool in her hand, a crowbar she had sharpened on both ends. She held it steady. The man laughed softly. "You're not gonna win this," he said. "Maybe not," she replied. "But you're not walking away." The fight was fast, violent. He tried to grab her. She ducked, swung. The crowbar hit his leg. He stumbled, came at her again. She kicked him in the chest. He fell back, but he was fast. Too fast. She landed one more blow before he tackled her. They rolled across the dirt, fists flying, then gunshot. He froze. Behind them Jake stood, holding her flare gun. It had gone off into the air, but it was enough. The man looked at the boy, then at Marissa, and ran. She didn't chase him. She held Jake close and whispered, "You did good." That night, she radioed Keller, told him everything. And this time, she agreed. It wasn't over, but she would never back down, because now, it wasn't just about a car. It was about every secret that had been buried, and every person who thought they were above the law. She was coming for them. All of them. The days after the man came to the cabin felt longer and heavier than ever. The danger was real now, close enough to touch. The man who attacked her had not come to scare her. He came to silence her. And if Jake hadn't fired that flare gun, she might not be alive to think about it. Marissa had always believed that keeping her head down and doing honest work was enough. Fixing engines, replacing brake pads, changing tires, those were her world. But now her world had shifted. What started with one car and one strange customer had turned into something far deeper, something darker, something that refused to end. The morning after the attack, Marissa didn't waste time. She packed everything again: food, gear, water, and, this time, she didn't leave a single trace behind. The cabin had served its purpose, but staying there meant risking Jake's life again. She couldn't allow that. Before sunrise, they were gone. Sean met them on a forest trail with a dirt bike and a small jeep. He had dark circles under his eyes and cuts on his hands. "They're moving fast," he said. "The guy who came to the cabin, we ID'd him. Name's Miles Renner, ex-military contractor. Worked with Knox for over 5 years. He's done work in 3 countries, none of it clean. The government's been trying to track him for months. He slipped through a net last year. Now he's hunting you." Marissa didn't flinch. "Then let's hunt him back." Sean raised an eyebrow. "You serious? I'm done hiding." He found the cabin. "He'll find the next one too. I can't keep running and hoping someone else solves this. I started this by saying no to a repair. I'll end it the same way, by standing up." Sean looked at Jake, who was sitting in the jeep, hugging a stuffed bear quietly. "You sure you want to involve him? He already is." They drove toward the city, but not back home. Instead, they went to a safe house Keller had arranged, a plain-looking motel outside the state line, protected by silent watchers and surveillance cameras. Keller met them there. His face was hard. His voice was tired. "I should have known Renner would make a move," he said, shaking his head. "He's more dangerous than Knox ever was. Less predictable." "Where is he now?" Marissa asked. "Somewhere in the hills east of your town. But he won't stay put. He's got contacts. And from what we found on his laptop, he's building something." "Building what?" "A car," Keller said slowly. "But not just any car. A mobile lab. We think he's trying to create a moving system that can carry and hide illegal weapons, like a military lab on wheels. You stopped Knox before he finished it. Renner wants to finish it now." Marissa frowned. "And he needs a mechanic." "Exactly. He wants you." That night, Marissa lay awake, staring at the motel's ceiling. The quiet buzz of the old light above her bed mixed with the sound of cars in the distance. She couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts ran through her head. Why had she ever thought her small-town life would stay small? Was this what her father had faced before his accident? He had been in the army, too. Maybe he had seen things like this. Maybe he had been trying to protect his family, just like she was now. She sat up and reached into her bag. At the bottom, under her clothes, was the file Keller had given her. Photos, maps, a list of names connected to Renner. She flipped through them one by one. Men in uniforms, scientists, drivers. One face caught her attention. An older man with a crooked nose and wire-rimmed glasses. His name was Lewis Grant. According to the file, he had been working on software for military-grade vehicles. He went missing 3 months ago. Marissa stared at the photo. "I think I know where this guy is," she said the next morning. Sean and Keller both turned to her. "What?" Keller said. "I've seen him before. A few years ago, before I opened my shop. He came to town looking for custom parts. He said he was restoring an old military Jeep. He offered to pay me double if I made the parts quiet. I didn't take the job, but I remembered his face." "Are you sure it's him?" 100%. Keller opened his laptop and pulled up surveillance footage from near Jericho Ridge. "This was taken 3 days ago," he said. It was grainy, but there. He was, Lewis Grant, getting into a van with blacked-out windows. "If we can find him," Keller said, "we can stop whatever Renner is building." They made a plan. Sean would take a small team and follow Grant's trail. Marissa would go back to her shop for the first time in days. If Renner wanted her, she would bait him, draw him out, make him show his hand. "I don't like this," Sean said. "You're putting yourself in the center of the storm." Marissa smiled faintly. "I already am. Might as well face it." She returned to her garage just after noon. Everything was exactly how she left it. The Mustang was gone. The barn had been cleared. But her tools were still there. The smell of oil and metal still filled the air. It felt like coming home, if home came with danger around every corner. Cassie hugged her hard. "Are you okay? Is Jake okay?" "We're all right," Marissa said. "But it's not over yet." Cassie looked nervous. "What do you need?" "A favor. Watch the road. If anyone comes in asking for me, call Keller." Cassie nodded. By nightfall, the trap was set. Marissa worked under the hood of an old pickup truck, keeping her eyes on the shop windows. She didn't know when Renner would come, or if he would, but something told her he couldn't resist. At 11:47 p.m., the bell above the garage door rang. She looked up. A man stood in the doorway. It wasn't Renner, but he had the same hard look, the same quiet danger. "You're Marissa, right?" he said. She didn't reply. "I was told you're the best mechanic around. Mind taking a look at my car?" She stared at him, then said, "Pop the hood." He walked out to a black SUV. She followed. As soon as she lifted the hood, she saw it. Military wiring, fake ID numbers, a hidden panel that looked far too high-tech for any civilian vehicle. "I'm not fixing this," she said. The man smiled. "I thought you'd say that." He pulled a small device from his pocket and pressed a button. All the lights in the garage went out. Complete darkness. Then a voice echoed from behind her. "Well, well. You really don't give up, do you, Renner?" Marissa turned slowly. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. He stood in the shadows, tall and smug, wearing a jacket with no name tag. "You're smarter than I expected," he said. "And, more trouble than you're worth." "You don't scare me," she said. "Oh, but you should be scared. You've ruined plans that took years to build. You destroyed trust between people more powerful than you can imagine." She stepped back slowly toward the shelf where she had hidden a small flare gun, just like the one Jake had used. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to finish what Knox started. Help me build the mobile lab. Just long enough to get It across the border. Then you can go free. Marissa laughed bitterly. You think I believe that? He shrugged. You don't have to believe. Just work. In one fast motion, she grabbed the flare gun and fired. The flash lit up the whole garage. Sirens wailed outside, doors burst open. Keller's team swarmed in, armed and shouting. Renner tried to run, but Marissa tackled him to the ground. They struggled, but she didn't let go. Within seconds, he was cuffed and dragged away. It was over, really over this time. 2 weeks later, Marissa stood on the porch of her home. Jake played in the yard, his laughter carrying on the wind. The town was quiet again, peaceful. Keller visited one last time to tell her the full story. Renner's lab was found and dismantled. Lewis Grant had been rescued. The program Knox started was shut down. Everyone involved had been arrested. You did something incredible, Keller said. You're not just a mechanic anymore. I never was just a mechanic, she said. Keller smiled. If you ever want a job in D.C., let me know. She shook her head. I've got enough work here. When he left, she walked back into the garage and opened her tool chest. Inside, she placed one final item. The small flare gun. It wasn't a weapon. It was a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing meant saying no, even when it was dangerous, even when it could cost everything. She closed the drawer and got back to work because there were still cars to fix, still engines to build, and still a life to live. Not hiding, not running, but standing, always standing.